Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily, a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, and I use AI as a thinking partner in preparing each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. Today, I want to talk about a recent study that comes from three economists, Philip Oreopoulos at the University of Toronto, Oliver Keyes, Chris Kowski, also at Toronto, and Deepak Agarwal at Khan Academy. It was published as an NBER working paper, that stands for National Bureau of Economic Research, working paper in January of 2026, which means it hasn't gone through peer review, but it's a randomized controlled trial with a large sample and careful design, and the findings are clear enough that I think it's worth discussing with that caveat. I came across it through Carl Hendrick's Learning Dispatch with Substack. I'd recommend anyone who wants research surfaced with a critical eye. So here's the setup. 83 government boarding schools in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh all had access to Khan Academy. Same platform, content, adaptive sequencing. Half the schools also received a dedicated person on the ground. The researchers called these lab in charges, whose sole responsibility was ensuring the platform actually got used. The other half were on their own. Now, the results were pretty striking. Students in the schools with lab in charges scored nearly half a standard deviation higher on independent math assessments after 7 months. In concrete terms, that means it's roughly equivalent to moving an average student from the 50th percentile to somewhere near the 67th or 68th. The researchers describe it as one of the most effective interventions reported in the education policy literature. And both groups had the same technology. So I think the question here is, what exactly were these lab in charges doing that produced that difference? When you look at the list, it's striking, but not for the effect sizes. Here's what they're actually doing. Making sure the Wi-Fi worked, completing student rostering process that teachers found too time-consuming, protecting the scheduled session time from getting bumped by competing priorities, keeping students on the platform and off games during sessions, coordinating with teachers so that the content aligned with what was being taught in class, and running motivational campaigns like streaks and certificates to sustain engagement week after week. Now, almost none of that is instructional in a traditional sense. It's organizational, logistical, relational. It's very familiar. It's the work you do before any lesson starts. It just doesn't show up in a platform dashboard. So I want to share something from my own experience because it came to mind as I was reading the study. Back in 2012, when I was working at Achievement First, which is a charter school network in the Northeast in the US, I was working with a Harvard undergraduate who was writing a senior thesis on whether a personalized reading platform was actually producing learning gains for students. His analysis was rigorous. He looked at usage data, assessment results, student motivation, all that. And at the end of what was genuinely sophisticated work, his conclusion was essentially, it depends. What it depended on more than anything else was the teacher and how they were using the tool, specifically whether the teacher understood this tool, embraced it, built complementary instruction around it. And when that was present, there were positive effects, but when it wasn't, the platform just sat there. That undergraduate is now a product manager at Anthropic. The question he was asking in 2012 is the same question we're asking today. Now, a reasonable response to all of this might be, that was 2012, Khan Academy in this study was being used in 2022 to 2024. AI tools have gotten substantially more sophisticated since then. They're conversational, adaptive, responsive, in real time. A modern AI tool isn't the static platform that we were looking at 10 plus years ago. It adjusts to where a student is, it responds to confusion, provides feedback, stays available without any scheduling protection. Hasn't the technology changed enough that this is no longer relevant? It's a fair argument, and in some ways, yes, the surface of the problem has changed. An AI tool today can do things that Khan Academy in 2022 couldn't do, and the things that the personalized reading platform from 2012 couldn't do either. But if you look back at that list of what the lab in charges were actually doing, that is protected curriculum time, for example, that's a school scheduling decision. It's not an algorithm in the software. Teacher coordination so that the platform content connects to what's being taught in class. Again, a pedagogical judgment that lives with the teacher. And the human reason that a student stays on the task rather than disengaging is motivational and relational work, and no adaptive sequencing has solved that in any kind of reliable way. Now, I've covered this topic on the show before in the context of Khanmigo, Khan Academy's AI tutoring tool. What the Khanmigo story showed was that a well-resourced, well-intentioned AI tool, one that Sal Khan described from the TED stage as potentially the biggest positive transformation education has ever seen, found that for most students it was, in Khan's own words, a non-event. The platform eventually had to make itself larger on the screen, then appear automatically 1 second after page load, then become always on, activated without any action from the student, all because the students weren't choosing to engage with it on their own. The technology was getting more sophisticated, but the engagement problem stayed the same. Now, this is where I think AI tools introduce something that's new. It's not a new problem, but it's a new version of the old one. And the real novelty here is that it's harder to see. The sophistication of the AI tool is visible and legible. The conversational fluency, personalization, always-on availability create a plausible impression that the conditions for learning have been handled. That impression is more convincing than anything EdTech has offered before. A worksheet never looked like it could motivate a student, but an AI tutor that holds a conversation and adjusts to your level can look, briefly, like it's doing the motivational and relational work. But it isn't. The appearance is new, but the appearance shapes adoption decisions. So the sophistication of AI tools doesn't close the oldest gap in EdTech, it just makes the gap harder to see. So let me address directly to two different groups. For classroom teachers, this is the work that you do before you're ready to engage with any tool. It's the framing, the relationship, the reason a student would want to try. That work isn't preliminary to instruction, that is instruction. The Riopolis study is, among other things, a randomized controlled trial confirming what you already know from your classroom. When that work is present, tools can produce results, but when it isn't, the platform just sits there generating data that looks like learning, but we really have to wonder whether it actually is. For educators working at the district or coaching level, the adoption conversation almost never surfaces the right question. The right question is what the platform is assuming your schools will provide, and whether your schools can actually provide it. The more sophisticated the technology presents itself to be, the more that assumption may be obscured, but I want to argue that it's always there. For my part, I've come to recognize how these assumptions arrive with the introduction of new products. As we've thought about products like Newsela and Formative, we've created them, I think, in ways that are much more self-evidently reliant on teachers. Formative is a tool for teachers to use to gather formative assessment data to inform their next instructional move. Newsela is an instructional content platform that provides teachers and students with content to augment their curriculum, which is delivered by teachers. Neither platform is fundamentally designed as a standalone, and that's intentional. For teachers, I'm very curious about the work that you do before students are ready to engage with any tool. And I'm curious if you think that the people who make decisions about these tools understand that that work is real work and that it exists. And I would say for coaches and district leaders, when an EdTech implementation stalls in the building, what's the first diagnostic question? Is it more about the tool or is it about the conditions that we're assuming that the tool was already in place? Thanks as always for spending a little time. Look forward to seeing you on our next episode.